from today's particular. Oh, Craig, you had a little note. Not sure exactly if this is particularly about Oklahoma State, or Spencer Sanders, but Oklahoma State went from the favorite this week against Texas Tech, and now it's a pick'em game. Is that correct? No, that's TCU and Texas Tech. Sorry, Oklahoma State's game is now a pick'em game.
I think so, yeah. I don't know. I just mentioned to you guys before the show that I saw on Twitter that, the odds for was the Oklahoma State game had changed a little bit, and there's murmurs that perhaps Spencer Sanders doesn't play this weekend. So obviously that would make a massive difference going between him and Gunnar Gundy. And I don't follow all that stuff closely enough to know like exactly what tipped off folks to believe in that, other than there was a line change of some sort. And again, it was something I saw just kind of in passing, but saw enough of it to believe that it looks like there's enough scuttlebutt that perhaps he doesn't play this weekend. So if that were to be the case, and I'm certainly not reporting that would be very notable. And at this point, Oklahoma State just kind of trying to hang on as best they can given all of their injuries. And Mike Gundy said last week after they lost that obviously it was very embarrassing, 48-0 to Kansas State, that they had practiced differently. He did the typical thing people do of like throwing out enough information to get you interested, but did not actually say anything. So he throws out like, oh, we did some things differently in practice. In the moment anybody wants to ask him like, well, what exactly did you do differently? He don't want to answer the question. So you read that how you want to. Like if you want to say that they didn't practice at all last week, you could make that argument. I mean, they certainly didn't look like a team that did. If you want to say that they practiced only 2 days or something, you could make that argument. He left it vague. So that's, up to interpretation, but it certainly is they were not doing what they typically do last week because they didn't have enough bodies. He was trying to protect the guys they did have, what have you. But to what extent they did or didn't do anything, I don't know. But clearly not their norm. And now they're back to their norm, but is that even going to be good because they're shorthanded? I don't know. I don't know what their health situation is. They're going to guard that, so it's very interesting.
They started out a 6-point favorites, probably about what you would think, and now Kansas is a 1-point favorite.
There you go.
Well, and again, there's different types of there's different books and stuff like that, but that seems to be the consensus right now.
Bet Online has them as a pick 'em right now. Could it also mean though that we're tracking positively on Jalen Daniels as well?
No, it could be too. I didn't think about that. Yeah. All right, so
I think it definitely could. I mean, he's back practicing. I don't know that he swings it that wildly. But then again, that's not my forte. So, I'll leave that to the Vegas folks to tell us what that exactly means. But yeah, the thought, I guess I saw fleeting tweets was Spencer Sanders. But yeah, perhaps that's the Jalen Daniels factor. But man, that would be interesting to see him flip that in Kansas's favor. That's a lot of praise for him.
Baylor's an underdog in Norman.
Yep.
4.5 to 3.5 depends on which one you look at.
Been underdog all week.
3.5 and have been throughout the week from the start at 4.5. Oklahoma favored and now 3.5.
On film, I don't know why, but I guess on paper with the fact that they've won a couple games and are feeling confident and they're at home, I think that all matters in the long run. I think Baylor being inconsistent is the only reason why I'm not ready to just dive full into them winning this game. I do think they're the better team. I don't know if, top to bottom star rating they're as talented, but I think they're probably as close as they've ever been to Oklahoma in talent-wise, like given the, exodus of Caleb Williams and company that we saw, and then with Venables and them scrambled to put together with what they already had. I think these teams are, at worst, really even talent-wise. And Baylor, based on what we saw last week, was still more impressive than what I saw Oklahoma do against Iowa State. I mean, Oklahoma, kudos to them for winning that football game. Got a couple good backs who led the way on the ground, got enough stops on defense. Iowa State's offense stinks, though. I mean, they really do. And, that was still a 2-score game when all was said and done. Now, it was in Ames, so I give them credit. Baylor had to scratch and eke out a win, or get a win out there as well. It's not always the easiest thing to do, but there's nothing that I've seen from Oklahoma that I'm like, yeah, they're the definite favorites this weekend. I'm keen to roll with Baylor, but I do see that Oklahoma's favored, and they are at home, like I said. So it'll be very interesting.
So those are a couple of games to look at. I got a couple of chat rooms comments I want to bring up.
Yeah, I do think when you look matchup wise, of course, we kind of all missed on the big matchup last week. Baylor turned it on its ear, which makes them, it makes Baylor even more confusing to pick.
Exactly.
Because
we didn't miss them because we didn't think that they could win the game. Or like
Yeah.
I said it. I said right before the game, I said, I have a weird sense to pick them. And I'm not trying to make it sound like, oh, well, I was right in the long run, but I had this pull, like I just suddenly started feeling like, man, I think they're going to win this freaking game. And part of it was how I felt like the buildup was going to actually empower them and, become a distraction of sorts for Texas Tech. And certainly that's kind of how it played out. It's not the whole way it played out, but that had a big part of the reason of why it played out the way that it did. Tech, a little overwhelmed. Baylor in there as sharp and focused as they've been all season. But, do they turn around and still have that edge to them? That's what you can't predict. Ohio State's showing up with an edge pretty much every week. Those really good teams. And that's what I think is the difference between Baylor being a really good team and being just a good team like they are now is if I had more faith in them to week in and week out have that same game face on they had in Lubbock, I'm picking them this weekend without a question, even though they've only won there once. I would do that in a second, but I just don't trust them enough yet to – it's not even a talent thing. It's just I don't trust them enough to go up there with the mindset. And if they do, I think they'll be in good shape. But if they, listen to all the talk this week and, hey, we've won a couple games in a row and, there's not like all of this buildup in Joey McGuire and former coaches and they're trying to take your spot and all these other things, blackout, Mahomes, all these things that were used as motivation. Name a single thing that's really motivation other than it's playing Oklahoma for probably the last time in Norman, which to these kids is probably sort of kind of a thing, but I don't know that that's really weighing on them or motivating them that like this might be the last time Baylor plays in Norman. They're getting to play there, so I don't know that they really worry about 10 years from now. So what is their fuel? And that's what Dave Aranda's hammered home over and over again is having to create your own energy and, not need all of those outside things to be your sources of motivation. So if they can overcome that and they show up this weekend like they showed up last weekend or like they showed up in Ames, then, I think this team might be one where you start to wrap your arms around them and go, okay, it's finally clicked for them now. But I need to see that again this week to believe it's now a constant.
Was last week the exception or was last week turning the corner and who they're going to be on their way throughout the rest of the year? Does it mean someone still won't jump up and get them? And I don't even mean jump up. That means it sounds like somebody would be an underdog.